If we don't hit our 10,000 ounce goal, we're running out of time. We're running out of time real quick.
Yeah, it's starting to get pretty cold.
Yeah.
With only days left in the season, Alex climbs onto Roxanne and discovers cracks running straight through the screen deck of Parker Schnabel's biggest producer. There are still 430 ounces of gold left to find. At the record gold prices that autumn, those ounces represented roughly $1.7 million still buried in the frozen ground. Instead of slowing down, Parker pushes every plant harder, runs the equipment to its limits, and asks his crew to squeeze everything they can out of the final week.
Just broke 300.
That Goose paying itself off.
We got good old Roxanne, right?
All right.
Ready?
We did a lot of dozing this week and a lot of sluicing. See what we got.
Meanwhile, Tony Beets continues moving dirt across the valley. The final gold total could decide whether Parker reaches 10,000 ounces or falls painfully short. The problem with Roxanne. Parker, we've got a big problem with Roxanne. There are some cracked cross tubes here. That radio call is serious because the damaged section is part of the screen deck, the area responsible for separating valuable material from waste. Raw pay dirt enters the wash plant through the hopper and is blasted with water before reaching the large, vibrating steel screen. The smaller material, including gold-bearing fines, falls through the holes and continues towards the sluice runs. Larger rocks and boulders travel across the top and leave the plant as waste. The screen deck takes a tremendous amount of punishment. Loader buckets drop tons of material onto it continuously, while the constant vibration puts enormous stress on the steel. Once cracks appear, the situation can deteriorate quickly. Every load that hits the deck makes the damaged metal flex. The cracks can spread, allowing oversized rocks to fall through areas where they don't belong. Those rocks can reach the sluices, damage the matting, and interfere with gold recovery. If the deck completely fails, Roxanne stops, and rebuilding it could take several days. Normally, Parker would shut the plant down and replace the damaged steel properly. But this is the final week of October in the Klondike. Winter is closing in, and there simply isn't time for a full rebuild. So the crew chooses the only option they have: keep Roxanne running and constantly monitor the damage. That means feeding the plant more carefully to reduce the impact on the cracked structure. But running less material also means recovering less gold. Every hour spent operating cautiously could mean ounces left behind in the ground. The crew also has to inspect the cracks between shifts, make temporary weld repairs in freezing temperatures, and clear oversized rocks manually if they make it into the sluice system. Roxanne isn't a spare machine. She has been processing pay dirt from Pit 2 on the Indian River claim and producing significant amounts of gold throughout the season. Losing her now could create a massive hole in Parker's final total. The plan isn't to make Roxanne perfect. The plan is simply to keep her alive until the season ends and deal with the permanent repairs after freeze-up. Every ounce matters. Then the pressure increases even further. Gold has reached another record price. That means every ounce Parker has already recovered is worth more, while the gold still buried in the ground is also becoming increasingly valuable. But there is a problem. Winter is about to make that gold inaccessible for months. The timing couldn't be worse. Gold prices are at record levels. Parker still needs hundreds of ounces, and his biggest producer is operating with a damaged screen deck. The crew now has to balance two dangerous choices. Run Roxanne too hard and risk a complete failure. Run her too gently and lose valuable production during the final days of the season. Every shift matters. Every ounce matters. And every lost day could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With the cracks spreading, winter approaching, and 10,000 ounces still within reach, Parker and his crew have only one objective: keep the machines running long enough to get the gold out before the ground freezes solid. Parker's crew knows Roxanne is in trouble, but there is a much bigger number explaining why he refuses to shut the plant down. They have already produced more than 9,500 ounces of gold this season. At roughly $4,000 per ounce, that is around $38 million worth of gold recovered from the ground. Reaching 10,000 ounces would push the total close to $40 million. For a relatively small operation, those numbers are extraordinary. Parker has built a high-production mining operation around a young crew and a handful of mobile wash plants, and now every ounce matters. Over roughly 6 months of non-stop mining, 9,500 ounces works out to around 400 ounces per week, or approximately 55 to 60 ounces every day. At record gold prices, one lost day of production could mean roughly $230,000 worth of gold left in the ground. That is why Parker cannot afford to shut Roxanne down for a proper repair. A full screen deck rebuild could take several days. 4 days of downtime could mean nearly $1 million of potential production lost just before the Klondike freezes solid. And there is no chance to catch up once winter arrives. When the mining season ends, anything left in the ground stays there until the following summer. Parker still needs more than 430 ounces to reach his target, representing roughly $1.7 million at current prices. That could be the difference between an incredible season and a result that falls painfully short. But Parker isn't only racing winter. Across the valley, Tony Beets is still producing. Tony has spent decades mining these grounds, and his operation is built very differently from Parker's. He spreads his risk across more ground and machinery, works with family, and operates a dredge that functions almost like a massive floating factory. Parker relies on several fast, mobile wash plants. His strategy has always been straightforward: move more dirt, run more plants, work longer hours, and outrun Tony. The problem is that a plant-based operation depends completely on its equipment staying operational. Every hour Roxanne sits idle gives Tony another chance to close the gap. That is why Parker's answer to a cracked screen deck isn't caution. It's to keep pushing. By the final weeks, the entire operation starts to resemble an emergency response unit. Mitch is stripping overburden from ground that may not even be mined until next season. In the Klondike, where the mining window is only a few months, getting that work done early can save an enormous amount of time later. At the same time, he is helping keep Roxanne alive and preparing the next pit on the Indian River. Tyson is dealing with another major challenge on Dominion, trying to keep 3 wash plants running at once. He has to feed them, clear blockages, repair equipment, and keep production moving as temperatures continue to fall. Cold weather creates even more problems. The water gets colder, clay becomes harder to wash, and equipment and lines become increasingly vulnerable to freezing. Parker has deliberately spread his operation across multiple areas to process more material, but that strategy comes with a price. More plants mean more machines that can fail. More machines mean more repairs, and more repairs mean more lost production. At this point in the season, there is no complicated strategy left. Feed the plants. Run them. Fix whatever breaks. Then start again. Keep going until the water freezes. But while the machines are receiving most of the attention, the crew is taking punishment too. Alex is welding when a piece of molten metal breaks loose and drops into his boot. Weld spatter can reach temperatures of around 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to cut structural steel. The machines may be designed to handle extreme conditions, but the people operating them are not. Alex has to deal with the burn while the rest of the operation keeps moving. That is the reality of Parker's final push. Gold prices are at record levels, winter is closing in, Tony Beets is still producing, and Parker's equipment is beginning to fail. But stopping isn't an option. The crew has only one choice: keep the plants running, repair whatever breaks, and push for every remaining ounce before the Klondike freezes solid. The molten metal goes straight through Alex's leather boot and sock and burns his skin. At around 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit, weld spatter can cause severe second-degree burns that may take weeks to heal. Matt reaches him and does what he can on the remote job site. They flush the burn, apply a dressing, and make sure Alex knows to clean it properly and use antiseptic gel when he gets home. Despite the injury, Alex jokes about it, even saying that part of his sock has practically welded itself to the wound. Then he gets back on his feet and returns to work. Not because Parker is forcing him to, but because there is nobody else available to take his place. That single fact exposes one of the biggest weaknesses in Parker's operation. There is no backup crew. Every person is essential. If Alex stops, the welding stops. If the welding stops, repairs on Roxanne stop. If Roxanne stops, gold production drops. And with more than 430 ounces still needed, every lost hour matters. So Alex goes back to work with a dressing inside his boot, and the plant keeps running. Parker's final strategy is simple. Push the wash plants as hard as possible. Every plant is running at maximum capacity. Conveyors are heavily loaded, Big Red is running hot, and the entire operation is being pushed beyond normal limits. But running a wash plant this hard comes with serious consequences. Higher feed rates mean more rock hitting the screen deck, creating heavier impacts and more stress on the structure. Overloaded conveyor belts stretch and put additional pressure on their splices and edges. Bearings also face higher loads and temperatures. Heat breaks down grease and wears components faster, meaning parts that could normally last for years may fail much sooner. Screens wear faster because they are constantly being battered by larger amounts of rock, while pumps and engines are forced to operate at high output for long periods. The damage may not be obvious immediately. A machine can finish the season looking fine, only for the crew to discover during winter maintenance that multiple components need to be replaced or rebuilt. The crew understands the risk. They know the plants are being pushed hard, but the decision isn't theirs. Their job is to keep everything running and help Parker reach his goal. Parker takes the risk, the crew carries the workload, and the repair bills will come during the winter when the ground is frozen and no gold can be recovered. But Parker knows the alternative. If he slows down and plays it safe, he could finish around 9,600 ounces. That would still be an outstanding season, but 10,000 ounces is the milestone that could define the entire year and give him a clear advantage over Tony Beets. So the machines keep running. Then, one of the least glamorous machines on the property suddenly threatens to stop the entire operation. The radial stacker quits. The stacker doesn't recover gold or directly generate revenue. It is simply a long conveyor that carries waste rock away from the wash plant and piles it into a large stockpile. But without it, the wash plant can't keep operating. Every wash plant produces enormous amounts of tailings, and that waste has to be moved away continuously. When the stacker stops, the tailings begin piling up beneath the plant. As the pile grows, the discharge area becomes blocked. Once there is nowhere for the waste to go, material starts backing up through the system, eventually forcing the entire wash plant to shut down. That makes the stacker far more important than it looks. The crew has already pushed the equipment to its limits, worked through injuries, and accepted enormous mechanical risks just to keep production moving. Now even the waste handling system is threatening to bring everything to a stop. Winter is approaching. The 10,000 ounce target is still within reach, and there is no time left for another major failure. The message is simple: fix the stacker, get the plant moving again, and keep recovering gold for as long as the Klondike allows. One simple conveyor can bring a multi-million-dollar mining operation to a complete stop within minutes. Liam quickly finds the problem. The conveyor belt is covered in fine, slippery mud, leaving almost no grip between the belt and the drive drum. The drum spins, but the belt struggles to move, causing material to pile up behind it. However, the mud is only a symptom. The real problem is the conveyor's position. There isn't enough overlap between the head drum and the rock box, so material leaving the wash plant falls short of the belt. Instead of being carried away, it piles up underneath the conveyor and begins burying the hopper. The stacker is slowly being buried by its own waste. The crew's solution is to move the entire stacker backward using its own hydraulic system. With no crane available, they have to move the machine step by step. The hydraulic legs lift the stacker off the ground, freeing the axle. Then the hydraulics shift the machine backward a short distance before setting it down again. Lift, move, set it down, repeat. It's a dangerous process because a radial stacker with its conveyor raised is extremely top-heavy. Once the axle is released, much of the machine's stability disappears. The ground is already wet and badly churned from months of mining, so if the stacker begins to roll, there is little anyone can do to stop it. But the crew takes the risk because the safer option is losing an entire day of production. At roughly $230,000 worth of potential gold per day, Parker simply cannot afford that delay with winter approaching, and the weather is making everything harder. By late October, daylight is disappearing quickly. More work has to be done under artificial lights, while water lines are beginning to freeze overnight. A wash plant depends on a constant supply of water, so every frozen line has to be thawed before production can restart. The ground is also freezing harder, making digging slower and putting more stress on the heavy equipment. Even gold recovery becomes more difficult. Cold water and thick, sticky clay change how material moves through the sluice. Fine gold can remain suspended longer instead of settling into the recovery mats, while partially frozen concentrate takes longer to clean up. Each of these problems reduces production at exactly the moment Parker needs more ounces. A plant that could produce well over 100 ounces a week during the middle of summer is now fighting to maintain that level. Every ounce lost represents roughly another $4,000 missing from Parker's target. Back in the shop, the mechanics understand what is happening. Parker's crew has pushed an enormous amount of rock through these machines all season. The cracks and damaged components are simply the price of running equipment this hard. Then Parker makes the situation clear. If they don't reach 10,000 ounces, it won't be because the gold wasn't there. It will be because the plants couldn't survive the workload. They have put an enormous amount of dirt through the equipment, and now the machines are paying the price. The gold is still underground, but the window to recover it is almost gone. This is the week that matters. There won't be a better opportunity. Each remaining day will bring shorter daylight, colder temperatures, harder ground, and more mechanical problems. So now everything comes down to one final question. How much gold did they actually recover? The golden mile is ready. The pans come out. The scale is set. After months of nonstop work, injuries, breakdowns, and freezing conditions, the entire season is about to be reduced to a single number. They start with the bridge cut. Bob has been averaging around 147 ounces a week from the bridge cut, making it one of the operation's most reliable producers. While other problems have dominated the season, the bridge cut has quietly continued delivering gold. Now, with the season coming to an end, every ounce from that ground could help determine whether Parker reaches the legendary 10,000 ounce mark or falls just short. The gold starts going onto the scale. The first plant reaches 127.35 ounces, worth roughly $509,000 at about $4,000 per ounce. It is slightly below its usual weekly average, but every ounce matters now. Then comes Roxanne. After spending the week running with cracked cross tubes and a damaged screen deck, the plant delivers 133.9 ounces. The machine that Parker nearly had to shut down has actually outperformed the healthy plant. That brings the weekly total to 261.25 ounces, leaving just over 200 ounces to reach the target. Now everything depends on Goose and Big Red, the two plants that have been pushed harder than ever during the final days. The scale climbs past 100 ounces, then 140, and eventually passes 200. The crew waits. Finally, the number settles at 258.15 ounces. That means Goose and Big Red produced more than $1 million worth of gold in a single week. Now the numbers are added together. 127.35 ounces, 133.9 ounces, 258.15 ounces. The final weekly total is an incredible 519.4 ounces. Parker only needed around 430 ounces. He has cleared the target by a huge margin. More importantly, his season total crosses the 10,000 ounce mark, roughly $40 million worth of gold recovered from Yukon ground. For a moment, the crew is silent. After months of non-stop shifts, equipment failures, injuries, freezing temperatures, and relentless pressure, they finally realize the job is done. Then the smiles and laughter begin. But 10,000 ounces is more than a record on a scale. It represents more than 600 pounds of gold, recovered from 2 claims using 4 wash plants operating around the clock for roughly 6 months, and Parker's crew achieved it without much backup. They also paid a heavy price to get there. Roxanne was kept running despite serious structural damage. Alex returned to work after suffering a painful welding burn because there was nobody else available to take over. The crew pushed conveyors, screens, engines, pumps, and bearings far beyond normal workloads. Now the winter repair bill is waiting. The equipment that helped Parker reach 10,000 ounces will have to be inspected and rebuilt piece by piece. Belts, bearings, screens, and other components have all taken punishment that will eventually have to be paid for. Across the valley, Tony Beets finishes his season with a completely different style of operation. His equipment is heavier and slower, but his approach doesn't depend on pushing several mobile plants to their limits. Parker knew the risk. One major breakdown, or one extra day of downtime, could have changed everything. But the equipment held together long enough. The crew delivered, and Parker reached 10,000 ounces. Next spring, the snow will melt, and the mining season will begin again. Parker and Tony will return to the same race, starting from zero. But this season will always be remembered. The final week produced 519.4 ounces. The season crossed 10,000, and a small crew pushed themselves and their machines to the absolute limit to make it happen. Now comes the next challenge. What does Parker chase after 10,000 ounces? And after everything they put the equipment through, how much of the fleet will actually survive the winter rebuild? The scale gave them the number, but the faces around it showed what that number really cost.